He is Casey Stern. I'm Cyrus Satsas. This is NBA Coast to Coast. We're back, baby. We're talking hoops. Casey, let's have fun, brother. I've missed you.
Really? I love hearing that. That feels good.
Well, let's make everyone else feel good now. It's NBA Coast to Coast. Yeah, that's the name of the program, NBA Coast to Coast. He is Casey Stern. You can follow him on Twitter at Casey Stern. Insanely easy. You can follow me, Cyrus Satsas, over on that other platform, Threads, at Dog Wild. And today's episode, before we get started, got to give some love to the official sponsor of NBA Coast to Coast, and that's Bet Online. We're going to be touching on that a lot today because, Casey, I'm going to present to you some fascinating lines and spreads and futures that Bet Online provides for everyone. It's the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. That's right, folks. Football is back from the preseason NFL to college kicking off. Bet Online has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. And if you think you know your stuff, get in on the winner-take-all $300,000. That's a down payment on a house. NFL Survivor Pool for the upcoming.
I'm jotting down the information. What do I do?
When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use the promo code BELIEVE. It's the name of our network, BLEAV, and get in on the action. Bet Online, the game starts here. Casey, I'm genuine when I say this. I've missed you, brother. How have you been, man? How, all things considered.
Yes, I'm good, man. Life it throws curveballs. So I've got a lot of exciting things that are going on personally that I've been dealing with, and some changes in terms of jobs and work. So that has kept me busy. So I haven't done. This is the first podcast of any kind I've done in the month of August.
I've noticed that. Yeah.
It began with my best friend of 16 years, my golden retriever Charlie, passing away. Which was unfortunate. I appreciate that, but not to be a buzzkill. But that was difficult for me, even more difficult, more so for my kids. So that took me kind of off the grid for a while. So I have been juggling and jumping through hoops, but all is well here. And I'm looking forward to being back with you, man. Looking forward to talking some sports and talking some hoops. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, Damien.
Was that Damien? Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and I share Damien's sentiments in the chat. He's saying sorry, and it sounds like your pup and mine were the same age. Mine left a little over 2 years ago, and you know what? I remember I couldn't host for like weeks after. I had to take a week off. And
it was tough. It was tough. And you know what it is? It's dogs are, in a lot of ways, they're better than people. They are our best listeners. They're our best therapists and all of that. So in a topsy-turvy last 5 years, I know for me, especially in my life and for my kids, this was really the constant. So it was difficult, but at the same time, celebrate 16 years of life, which for a dog is great. And now I'm looking forward to being here with you and, shoot the shit about whatever anyone else wants to chime in and talk about, and all the stuff that we planned on talking about as well. And also I'll be jumping back and doing an Unfiltered and a Believe podcast on the Mets and some of my other stuff. So keep up with me. Next week or two, we'll be back in business across the board. So
really fast. How are the Mets doing, man?
Mets are doing okay. They're 2.5 out of a wild card. They were expected to do nothing this season. So they're doing okay. Yeah. I mean, look, if my sanity went based on how the Mets are doing, forget about my August that I just lived through. I mean, forget it. Yeah, luckily, I'm still here. If it was, thank God, it is not threaded in based on that. But no, they're doing okay. They're still in the mix. Hey, look, if your team's not good in any sport and you have no expectations before the season began to get into the playoffs, and you could play some meaningful games where if something good happens, you get in, we take that. And that goes to the NBA as well. So, we're doing okay. Doing all right.
Hell yeah, man. And someone who's not doing okay right now as we get into the show is former Detroit Pistons great Isaiah Thomas, who actually for a long time was in charge of your Knicks.
Yes. That's not why he's my guy, because that's the only part I don't like about him. I told him.
Well, I guess maybe that answers my question. I was going to ask you, like, for Knicks fans,
Yep.
what is the impression of Isaiah? Like, is there bitterness? Is there
It's
no
not
feeling?
wonderful.
Like what was your takeaway as
It's not wonderful. But there were some mistakes that were made. However, the relationship that he's got a very good one. For people who are not aware, with Jim Dolan, I think got in a way of maybe some of that. Also, coaching and running a team, which never seems to work well for almost anybody. 90% of the people who do that in this sport or any sport, something is going to fail because you just can't. It's too hard. There's a reason there's only 30 jobs, right? To go coach a team, then you're running a team, and that's an even much more important role and much more detailed. It's difficult, but I can say this. In working with him side by side for 5 years, and I did work with him on a desk often, very, very often, he could not be a nicer, kinder, more humble guy. His family is tremendous. And for those who don't know, he's also been extremely successful. He started Charlon. I don't know how to spell it, but it's a champagne brand that is absolutely like killing it. Like he's making bank over bank. It's sold all over the place. He's done a really good job. He's a terrific guy. But as a leader of the Knicks, I was not my favorite.
Yeah, and look, the results I think speak for themselves. It was not a great run when it comes to wins and losses. And the reason why I bring him up is because the future of the NBA, Anthony Edwards. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he led all scorers in the Olympics for Team USA. I know he wasn't like the main guy, but he was a fantastic part of the supporting cast, and I love the respect he was showing to the quote unquote elders. The respect was clearly there. He had fun. He was having fun. He was a part of it. And then in an interview that I believe, and I don't know what this interview was about, but it was published, I believe, in the Washington Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal, Washington, the Wall Street Journal. And Anthony Edwards was quoted as saying, "They say it was tougher back then than it is now, but I don't think anybody had skill back then. Michael Jordan was the only one that really had skill." And Isaiah Thomas took umbrage to that. He said, and I thought this was an excellent response. He wrote on Twitter, quote, "Propaganda works, so be careful what you choose to believe," unquote. 100% agree that propaganda is very effective. It's why we have laws in place, why a lot of countries don't even subscribe to free speech. It's because it can be toxic. It can persuade people to believe things that aren't true. And I think this is a perfect example of that. Casey, what is your response to Anthony Edwards' comments and Isaiah's response?
Sometimes when you can't find a word in the thesaurus that makes you seem smarter, you just use the first word that comes to mind. It's dumb. It's just really stupid. Smart people say stupid things, and I believe that. You can be the right kind of person and do the wrong thing. I believe that too. He's a guy who's got a ton of swag. It's why he was able to do what he did. Look, he tired out a bit, but look how much he carried Minnesota down the stretch last year and what he did with them, right? Go into the Olympic setting. Remember, he started the process by when they were going through their exhibitions saying that he was the A-lister on the team, or he was the go-to option, which is like, and he was not being tongue-in-cheek, but he should have been. Yeah. Because even if he was going to be in certain circumstances with Durant on the team and with LeBron, you can't be saying that. So understand that and understand the age of what this person is. I think if he goes back and looks at it, he will then try and explain to you, well, I didn't mean he was the only person. Because if he does mean he's the only person that had talent, talking about MJ, then it's really extraordinarily effing dumb. And then it gets even worse than dumb. Because we know it really, the conversation to be had is, you hear this all the time from athletes in any sport. Those who came before them weren't as good. They didn't work as hard. They weren't as talented. They weren't as athletic. They couldn't do what we can do. And those before say, those now have it easier than we had it. They couldn't hack it. They couldn't do. And there's some truth in all of that. But the conversation here is actually, how accurate is it to say, how accurate do you think it is to say that back then they being the league, didn't have as much talent? Because that's a conversation. The idea that MJ is the only one with talent is just, again, can we just, dumb is spelled, it's not DUM, which if you said something like this, you may think it is. There's a B on there. Just thought you should know.
I like you said, I like that. And just to give the folks some context here, I pulled up some of the All NBA teams from the '80s, and I'll start with '89-90, to paint a picture of the quote unquote lack of talent in the NBA besides Michael Jordan. The first team All NBA in '89-90 was Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, Michael Jordan, and Magic Johnson. Dude, Anthony Edwards comments, just Magic Johnson alone is a blatant insult. I mean, how could you say Magic doesn't have talent, let alone any of those players? Second team, Larry Bird, Tom Chambers, who had the most unstoppable play in that old NBA game. I don't know if you ever played that thing back in the Nintendo days.
I did.
The Tom Chambers dunk from the three-point line, Akeem Olajuwon, John Stockton, Kevin Johnson of the Phoenix Suns. And then the third team, Chris Mullin, James Worthy, David Robinson, Joe Dumars, one of the greatest defenders ever, and Clyde Drexler.
Yes.
You're sitting here telling me that any of those players, it's insane.
You mentioned 8 of the top 50 players ever in there that crazy. I counted. You had Malone, Drexler, Barkley, David Robinson, Magic Johnson, John Stockton, and maybe I'm missing one. At least 8, if not 9, of the top 50 players ever. So the idea that you're saying this is just not you, but him is just dumb.
Yeah.
But what's worse about it is you can't respect the game you're playing if you don't respect the hell out of the people who came before you to do it. You can't be respecting anything you're doing if you don't respect the people. It's like a kid not respecting a parent. I mean, honestly, Larry Bird, I'm sorry, you never heard of him? Like, how stupid is that? It's just dumb. The game was different. Now, ironically, the first part of what he said is true. It was a tougher game back then.
Oh, yeah.
It was a way to, now, it might not have been as pretty. It might not have been as fluid in some ways that people think. Although to me, I'd rather you pass the ball than play all the one-on-one BS we're doing now a lot, right? So I think there's a give and take, but it definitely was tougher. And you go ask people, because I've worked with those people, and you go ask them about the two-a-days and the practices they went through versus the forget practice, I'm not going to do it, and I need to be at a games once a week because I got to get through a season. Those guys were playing every game, were always hurt, and were practicing 10 times harder. If you ran through a practice now the way they did in the 80s, and you were a coach, you'd get arrested, like for assault. So, yeah, Anthony, you're right about part of it. They were way tougher back then. And, oh, by the way, if you're not sure that they were tougher back then, go see if anyone in the 80s said, you know, in the 60s, no one was talented other than Bill Russell. like how stupid is that? Sorry. And I like Anthony Edwards. He's just incredibly dumb.
Same. I'm 100% with you. But exactly that was, and just to give some context here, the 1969, I've all these All NBA teams in front of me right now. In 69-70, there was even talent back then. The first team was Billy Cunningham of the Sixers, Lonnie Hawkins of the Suns. I'm not that familiar with his game. Willis Reed of the Knicks.
He's pretty good.
Walt Frazier of the
also
Knicks.
Pretty good.
Jerry West of the Lakers.
He was decent.
Dude, a second team. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, John Havlicek, Gus Johnson of the Bullets, Oscar Robertson. Well, I don't know who Lou Hudson of the Hawks is. The point is, and they didn't have a third team back then, but the point is that there's been talent from the beginning to now. It is the young kids. Look, Anthony Edwards was born, and this is crazy, Casey. It always blows my mind that people now call the 1900s an era that people were born in. That is wild to me because Anthony Edwards was born in 2001. So it's crazy, right? I mean,
it is crazy. I was well out of college. It's bad. That's terrible. But it makes you understand it, right? Yep. And it makes sense because look, you know, a lot of the young athletes now they're on TikTok watching things about themselves. They're not out there learning about what happened before them, and that's part of the problem. Now, that doesn't mean that makes Anthony Edwards not a great player, because he is a great player and a great talent. But if in 20 years somebody is like, hey, you know, Kevin Durant was the only player who had talent in, you know, this decade, that sounds just as dumb as this does. So, but there's jealousy. It's all jealousy. And it's jealousy in both ways, by the way, because the older players are also jealous of, you know, some of the money that gets thrown out there now. They're jealous of how easy these players have it now. I mean, but so it's back and forth, but there's no perfect. It's like anything else. There's no black and white answer. There's a lot of gray because, it was tougher back then, but you still got tough players now. And, there's a lot of talent now. Now, look, the one thing I would say is, I'm curious your take on this. Overall, not Michael Jordan being the only one, there's more one-on-one ability from your top level talents now, probably, especially with when you talk about, look, we're talking about 20 years of, all these dribbling expeditions, things Steph Curry's doing, for example, for so many years, with his dribbling and shooting and all that, the things Kyrie does before, they weren't doing that back then. It's different now. So there's more of a show with that. And there's more of a, hey, well, let's all stand over here. And everything's about, look, the pick and roll. Look how different that is now compared to the way it was then. But I do think one-on-one talent and like unicorn abilities, there may be more players now in total than there were at the top of the level then. That I would say may be accurate, but a lot of people would say they played a more beautiful brand of basketball offensively in the 80s than they do now because they actually moved the basketball, which I know sounds crazy to a lot of players who are young and watching, and they just think you all stand over here and I'll just do a step back. Like it wasn't like that in 1985.
Do you want to hear real fast before we move on from this topic who the last All-NBA team was before cocaine was pretty much eradicated from the NBA? The 1978-79 All-NBA team. Some of these names you'll know. Some of these names are a complete mystery to me. Elvin Hayes of the Bullets.
Yeah, of course.
Fantastic player. I am not familiar with Marquez Johnson of the Bucks. Are you?
Yes, he's an announcer now, I think, for somebody. Yeah, but as a player, not as familiar. No,
he was a first-team All-NBA forward from the Bucks.
Yeah,
Moses Malone, I think we all with. George Gervin, aka the Iceman. Paul Westphal of the Suns, right?
Yep.
Fantastic offensive player, certainly. Second team, and this is where it gets a little strange to me. Bob Dandridge, I've heard the name, but I don't know much about his game. You?
Name, yes. No. Game, no.
Same.
No.
Walter Davis of the Suns. I have no clue who that is.
Don't think so. No. Is that Hubert Davis's dad? I don't know. Could be.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. We all know.
I've heard of him. Yes.
Phil Ford of the Kansas City Kings.
Yeah, that's another. I think did he become a coach? Because there's a Chris Ford that was a coach. I think maybe a Phil
Correct.
Ford.
That's what I'm thinking of too. Yeah.
Or you could just drive a Ford, which I have in the past. There's a reason it's found on road dead for those who have one. Go ahead.
And then the last one, because they don't have 3 teams yet at this point, World Be Free of the San Diego Clippers, the San Diego Clippers. And side note, by the way, one of my pieces of writing that I'm proud of, I published this back in 2014 or 15 for the Huffington Post, and it's still out there if you just Google it. Google San Diego, the history of professional basketball in San Diego. I wrote a whole 2-part story, did a lot of research on this, man. I spent like a month publishing this. I got photos from those days, got the copyright for it, and it's an entire story on the history of professional basketball in San Diego, which is surprisingly illustrious. Like, I didn't know when I was doing my research that the Houston Rockets were originally the San Diego Rockets, and that the name Rockets still has a NASA connotation to it. But back then, they made the Atlas Rockets in San Diego. So if I'm losing people at this point.
No, I didn't know that.
I didn't either until I did my research. Like Pat Riley was playing on that team. And then here's another really weird one. The Golden State Warriors, for 1 year of their franchise history, shared Oakland with San Diego as their home. And it was a lot of that. This was back in 1971, and a lot of it was political because the Warriors were changing their name from the San Francisco Warriors to the Golden State Warriors, and they were using that Golden State name to cover the entire state, although in reality, it was a ploy to try to get the city of Oakland to build them what became their arena. And they threatened to move to San Diego, and they were using other cities as leverage. But with that said, for 1 year, the Golden State Warriors called San Diego home.
Which, by the way, is a great place for anyone who has not been to San Diego to call home. It's got the best weather in this country, and it is gorgeous there.
It is absolutely.
Big fan.
Absolutely. You've nailed that on the head. Talk about a place to take your kids, man. That is a
talk about a place to take me.
I called that area home for 4 years. If anyone ever needs food or any kind of recommendations, my DMs are open. So are Casey's.
So are mine to take me to San Diego.
Exactly.
I'll Google recommendations. You just go ahead.
Some sad news real fast, but I have to address it simply because he was such a profound part of basketball in the NBA. We lost a member of the NBA, and that's head coach Al Attles, who passed away today. I just want to really quickly read off some interesting tidbits about his history. The Warriors sent a press release, and I thought this was fascinating. Al Attles is still the all-time leader in wins for the Golden State Warriors in terms of coaching wins. He currently has 38 more wins than Steve Kerr. So Steve Kerr could take over that title this year. But he's been battling an illness for a long time, and just wanted to acknowledge that Al Attles, rest in peace, man. Here in the Bay Area, at least, he was a very big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Very sad. All right, are you ready to talk some gambling, dude? Like,
I mean, yeah, as long as it's not my money, absolutely. Yeah.
All right.
I could give great advice if I could give great advice, and then when I go ahead and do it, the world will just come in half and everything will go the other way. So I tend to just leave. It's like gambling to me is like relationships. If you're asking me how to help you, I'm here for it. I just can't help myself.
Dude, that's great. That's very well.
I mean,
put.
It really is yeah, to a T.
Very well put. That's a commendable line right there.
Yeah. And
in the chat before we move on, D57 writing that Wilt and Bill Russell are rarely mentioned in a GOAT discussion. On my program yesterday, we actually covered the top 10 greatest players ever. Trice High and I each shared our lists, and I had Russell 5th. I had Wilt, I think, 9th on my list. Are either of those players in your top 10?
Yes.
Have you?
Yeah, Bill Russell is way up there for sure.
You don't have to answer this now, but do you have off the top of your head your top 10? I'm sorry. That's why I'm putting you on the spot. So if you can't do it right now, that's fine.
I would have MJ, and then I would be probably Bill Russell is in my top 5 for sure. I'd have LeBron in there, Kobe. Yeah, I'd have to because I got Magic in the top 10 for sure.
Kareem?
Yeah, Kareem is in the top 10 for sure.
Is Larry Bird in your top 10? Is Shaquille O'Neal in your top 10?
No, Shaq wouldn't be. No. Larry Bird would be close. I'd have to see how many names I had.
Yes,
but I would have Larry Bird. Larry Bird would be ahead of Shaq for me.
Is Tim Duncan in your top 10?
Very good question. No, I think I'm missing older players though, because it's not fair for everything to be just that I watched. And outside Bill Russell, I would have Wilt in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I would have Wilt in there. But for me, I'm most likely Jordan, LeBron, Kobe, Russell, Kareem as the top 5 in some order behind Michael, which doesn't matter because he's number 1 and everything else is subjective. Yeah, everything else is subjective.
Sentiments are shared. What about Stephen Curry? Is Stephen Curry a top 10 player?
He'd be close. I think for me, Steph gets undervalued sometimes by people who just want to kind of shoo him off because they're not sure. Like they're trying to place in pigeonholes. He a point guard. No, he's not a point guard. Is he a shooting guard? Oh, he doesn't play enough defense or whatever they want to complain about. For me, he's in the top 5 of the most exciting players that have ever lived, in my opinion. And that's a list I'd almost rather be on because it's supposed to be about entertainment. And he's as entertaining as anybody. I couldn't put him ahead of Shaq or Larry Bird, 2 of the guys that you mentioned. You know, Charles is up there also in the mix of one of the better players, even though he doesn't get enough credit. I don't think people realize if you stand next to him that he's only 6'4". And I don't really think people understand that Charles Barkley played a position where the way he played, you would have to be 6'9", 6'8" at least, even in today's NBA, to be as ferocious and dominant as he was. Think about guys who dominated on the boards like Dennis Rodman, who was 6'9", 6'10".
No, he was like 6'8".
Was he 6'8"? Charles Barkley is like 6'4". He's not tall. Correct. And it's amazing the career that he put together that way. But I think LeBron, Russell, Kareem, Kobe, 2 through 5 in any order, and you can't go wrong. But Michael Jordan's the best player that's ever lived.
Easily. Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Yeah. John Holmes in the chat adding that Wilt once had 55 rebounds. 55.
Yeah, well, that's crazy.
boards against Bill Russell. And another person in the chat, Genji Gok, who says, I've been around since the Bulls era and nobody has been as dominant as Shaq.
It's true, but
And
size is a large part of that.
Yeah, and this is also the challenge with these kinds of conversations, that if you didn't witness it yourself, it's hard to truly get a grasp of their impact on the game. Now, with that said, sorry, I'm watching these two massively huge trucks trying to pass my house right now. Anyways, but Rick Barry, who my broadcast partner on the Rick Barry show, and when I hear him talk about the dominance of Wilt, I defer to that, right? I mean, he literally played against them. He experienced it. And I've talked to other old timers about this, and they all have it's a universally shared opinion that Wilt was just such a dominating force. But if you didn't see it yourself, it's just hard to grasp that, right?
Well, that's part of it. The other part of it is, and look, Shaq is one of the greatest players ever, whether he's like 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12, he's somewhere in that, if that mix, like 8 to 12, which, by the way, it's like, how bad is that? Okay, there's only 7 players. And Shaq wouldn't like it because I know he wants to be number 1 on every list. But as far as dominance is concerned, I think one of the things that Shaquille has going for him is he played in an era with Hakeem Olajuwon and David Robinson and Patrick Ewing and Alonzo Mourning. And there are others that I'm missing who were at the top
Eaton.
Who are at the top of their game. Brian Big Country Reeves, no. But who are at the top of their game, but also atop the lists of all lists. I mean, these are some of the greatest players ever. Did Wilt have as many of those guys who could do the kind of things? I mean, people don't really respect it enough, but you look at Olajuwon, who, if he had played in a little bit of a different era, would have been hitting threes, because he had the kind of shot where it's just, you were never doing it in his day. And he would have elevated his points. I don't think people realize how great Hakeem was. Not you and I, but a lot of people maybe who are younger, who did not see him play, the touch that he had. But when he was straying that far away from the basket, it wasn't like Shaq could just stay defensively and hang around in the paint under the hoop all the time. A lot of these guys we're talking about, Patrick Ewing was a guy who would take 18-foot shots all the time when you used to do that sort of thing. So I don't think in some way Shaq gets enough credit, but I wouldn't put ahead of Wilt and Kareem in my list. No, I would.
Yeah, totally with you. Adrian Gutierrez writes his top 10 is Wilt, Jordan, Magic, Bird, Dr. J, Hakeem Olajuwon, Kobe Bryant, Steph, LeBron, and Bill Russell. On my list,
in that order, like, you can't have LeBron behind.
I don't know if it's that order.
Okay,
maybe it is. I don't know.
Okay. I'm asking Adrian, because then I think it's a great list, but you can't, like, I'm not trying to be like the pro LeBron guy, because it's more from like in years of having to defend him, even though I don't think he's MJ. He definitely got to be ahead of Hakeem Olajuwon on a list.
Yeah, and my list, the two, like, for starters, when Steph won his 4th championship, I bumped Shaq out. Steph got into my top 10, bumped Shaq out. Shaq's number 11 on my list now. The only replacements on this is I have Tim Duncan in my top 10. Five titles, man. I mean, he was part of a 14-year from 99 to he was dominant for almost 2 decades. It was incredible. And then the other player that I have in here, so I replaced Dr. J with Tim Duncan, and then I don't see. Oh no, Bird's in here. So Kobe Bryant is. Oh no, Kobe's in there too. I'm trying to see who else is. Anyways, I'll look at that later. But that's
the other thing I'd throw in there, and we're having different conversations. So I'm tangent taking a bit, but we do these lists based on a lot of times accolades, right? Like acquiring over this many years what you've done, and then you try and take those 2 pieces and say, okay, well, which one was better at their height, or what position did they play? If Kevin Durant continues to do what he's doing and the way he plays, is he to me, Kevin Durant is one of the most talented players that's ever lived. Yeah. I'm sorry. Like, at his, I don't think people, it's like he's basically 7 feet tall, and like what he does is just ridiculous. And we're going to talk about Shaq, right? And I love Shaq, but he was given all of that size and he used it. It wasn't like he couldn't shoot free throws. He didn't have a great offensive game. He wasn't like, gazelling down the court necessarily. God bless you. I love you, Shaq. Kevin Durant at that size, what he does is a 1-of-1. So, where does a guy like that fit in? Are we worried more about the amount of points that he's compiled? Because if you ask me, like, okay, like, who is a better basketball player? Is Kevin Durant think about it. Is he a better basketball player than Shaq? He's not as dominant, because it's a little different when you use the word dominant in what you're saying, but he dominated every aspect of the game and could do more than Shaq could ever do. So what you watch Durant go win champion right by you in your backyard. I mean, he goes and does everything that he's doing now and fills it out the rest of his career. He's definitely one of the best 15 to 20 players of all time for sure. But you're going to tell me he's not on the back end of a top 10 somewhere? He's got to be on a list like this for me.
I would agree with you on the top 15, 20. He's certainly in there. But at least for me, the winning part of it is also important. Like how you perform in the postseason is important. And I think that's a ding on Durant, right? Like when he didn't have that super team, he's never accomplished the ultimate goal in the postseason.
Could you win with James Harden and Russell Westbrook?
Those two, I mean, that's
that part. So,
that's a whole other discussion. I think that plays into why Durant did what he did to go to the Warriors, right?
Of course, because I never blamed him for that.
Because when you talk about legacy, those rings do matter. I mean, Charles Barkley, bless him for saying that, it doesn't faze him that he never won a chip. But it's got to. I mean, it does matter in these conversations when you're talking about legacy. And even if Durant's going to get criticized for the rest of his life for that move, he still has those two Finals MVPs that he took away from that.
He shouldn't be criticized for that.
Yeah, and he shouldn't be. And I realized who's missing on Adrian Gutierrez's list. It's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I don't see
who's got to be way.
Yeah, Kareem's not in there, so that's what I would put in there as well. And Matt Brotherton in the chat, real fast, writes that there should be tiers to this, and that tier 1 is Jordan, LeBron, Bill Russell. Tier 2 is Magic, Duncan, Kobe, Kareem, Shaq, Bird, Steph.
Kobe, putting him in a tier 2 as a basketball player is a little difficult for me, even if you didn't like him, because a lot of people didn't like him, right? And he was okay. Was he a selfish player, or if he played against him, either he was a dirty player or whatever? And he had some, for all it may rest at the end of he's a better lesson in life than basketball, in terms of the way he handled things after some of the mishaps that he had in life. Towards the end of his life was exemplary in a lot of ways. And I think that's what makes him more endearing on the way out, if you will, unfortunate as it was how it ended. But from a basketball standpoint, from a career standpoint, I mean, one of the reasons we're not giving him enough credit is because he played with Shaq those years. But could he have not won without Shaq? And you put somebody... You could make a case that you could have given Kobe more of rope, more of the ball, and he would have been good enough to do that. It's hard for me to put him in a tier 2 of anything. And I wasn't always a huge Kobe fan, but fan of his game and his ability. I mean, go ask the players. They know better than we do. And when you go ahead, go Google interviews and go look at some of the best players that you have the last 10 years and the older players. And he's one of the rare guys that everybody agrees on is a top 5 player of all time.
Totally. And then John Holmes adding that some of the bigs that Wilt played against in his era, Nate Thurman, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Artis Gilmore, Bill Russell, Reed. Yeah. So, it's not like he was playing against just a bunch of scrubs during his era either. Yeah. So let's talk gambling, because BetOnline is our official sponsor, and gambling is fun. And your metaphor again was perfect. I think someone in the chat articulated that as well. Bravo on the the correlation between gambling.
It really is. It really is true. If you need my advice, I can give it to you as long as I can't give it to myself.
Oh, it's a great call. Yeah. Did you know? So the season opens on Thursday, October 22nd. And that is so far away, man. 2 months. I'm jonesing for basketball already. I think a lot of people are as well. And you can bet on those games. The opening night games, and it's if you're a Warriors fan, I know you're bummed that they're not included. But if you're a Knicks fan, you're elated because the Knicks are included on opening night. The Knicks are at the Garden taking on the Boston Celtics opening night. And then the nightcap from the West Coast, the Timberwolves take on LeBron's Lakers. I don't know if the Lakers should be in the opening night.
If you take on LeBron and maybe Bronny gets 3 seconds of time at the end. I mean, let's not lie. Which, by the way, I'm fine with. I don't blame the NBA at all. I would put LeBron on as much. If MJ's Wizards were on a lot, it doesn't matter, right? And so, I'm fine with that.
The Lakers have the most nationally televised games this year.
It's also the Lakers.
With 39. The Warriors have the second most nationally televised games with 36. And that just
Yeah.
goes to show the star power of
Steph.
Steph and LeBron.
Yeah.
It is a business. It is a business,
Of
folks.
course.
So actually, before I read these lines to you, man, I want to get your take on something else real fast because you didn't really talk. I don't know if you want to talk about the Olympics. I know we were off for a couple weeks. But one thing that a huge takeaway for me is watching the two best players on the reigning world championship team, the Boston Celtics, both get slighted. Jaylen Brown was not even selected to play on the Olympic team. Jaylen Brown was DNP'd and hardly played. He clearly
Tatum. Yeah.
What did I say? I'm sorry.
You said Brown twice, but yeah, I know what you meant.
My bad. And Jason Tatum.
I know what you meant.
But thank you for clarifying that because the audience.
Yeah, right.
Oftentimes when hosts make those mistakes, like I'm actually really thankful you corrected me because it always bothers me when I hear that. And
no, it's all right.
And the host doesn't hear themselves sometimes. Thank you. But my point is with these two slights, might have set up the Boston Celtics to go on a tear this year because their two best players are now on a mission. They're motivated. They've got a bowling ball sized chip on their shoulder. If you're a Knicks fan, were you annoyed at the fact that you just gave the Celtics some added juice for this season? Like
no, I hate the Celtics. Bring it. Let's go. No, I don't care. No, it doesn't bother me. And look, the Celtics are, and I've said this to you, which is why it's tongue in cheek. They should be the favorites to win the whole thing. They have a incredibly deep roster that can do things you need to do to win in the postseason. And it's deep enough to keep them being able to rest guys during the season to get there. They are a dangerous team. They can play defense. They can play with the ball. They can shoot. All the things you need to go make a run there. And they brought everybody back. I mean, it's a scary team, right? That being said, they're going to have some trouble. They're not going to run away from anybody in the East. I think the Sixers, will see if they're healthy enough, could be better. They should be better.
They're looking good.
If they're healthy enough. I mean, look, I really like Maxey as a player. I mean, we haven't talked about him much, but I really like him. And Embiid is a scary force when he decides to be. And I've always been a fan of Paul George's game. It's just unfortunate, really, ever since that injury he had in Indiana, all the hiccups, because he's a guy who is so talented and could do so many different things on the floor. They can be dangerous, but the Knicks are not going to be easy to play around with this year. And, it's a far cry. How interesting is it that during like the Carmelo years and thereafter, like the ABC and ESPN and TNT, they couldn't run away from the Knicks fast enough, even though it was the Garden, right? Everybody remember Kevin Durant when he was a free agent, making fun of like the idea that like he would even meet with the Knicks. Why would I have a conversation with them? Not anymore, because now you got New York and you got that building and a team that's exciting and has personalities that are fun. It's going to be tough, but yeah, Boston's deep, man. I mean, you tell me otherwise. I mean, look, forget the East or the West, anybody in the league. You can't tell me you've got a team that is deeper and stronger across the board than that roster is when it's healthy, and they're going to be tough to knock out. Boston's going to be tough.
Before the Olympics, I know you've been singing praises of the Sixers from the get-go, from the moment the offseason started. I was skeptical. I didn't think the Paul George signing alone was enough to put them in the same caliber as the Celtics and the Knicks, who to me are the top dogs in the Eastern Conference. But then Joel Embiid, I mean, you've seen it and time and time and again in the Olympics where some players really benefit and grow from that experience. And I feel like Joel Embiid could be one of those instances, one of those cases. I mean, that performance in the Serbia game where he manned up against Nikola Jokic and held his own and scored some huge buckets down the stretch, and also being surrounded by all that greatness and taking in the work ethic, the attitude, that really changed my tune. To me, the Sixers, just from that alone, from Joel Embiid, already an MVP caliber player in the NBA.
Yes.
They scare me a lot more now than they did before the Olympics. And then they made a very subtle move by adding the kid from France, the power forward, Isabelli, I think you pronounce his name.
Yep.
So Philly is if I'm in the East, Philly to me is a lot more daunting than they were a month ago, and that's just me. I don't know if you're.
No, it's not just you. And look, the thing about Embiid, we mentioned Shaq before. Embiid is the kind of guy that like shackle of a coronary, like even thinking, because Embiid should be the most dominant player in the NBA. When you look at his ability and his size,
Correct.
if you could put the work ethic that he needs and take away the flighty and flakiness, he should be the most dominant player in this sport. The things he can do and the way he's capable of shooting, you can't stop him. I mean, there's no, you can put the ball in his hands 50 times and he should be leading the league in scoring easily, but he can't stay on the floor. He seems to be a pain in the ass half the time. And to your point of the Olympics, where were we a week before that? He was lost. Like in the exhibition games, he looked like he didn't give a shit. Right. So that's the problem with him. Now, being fair, it seems on the outside that Paul George may be the kind of person to put with him where James Harden was not on his own, where you can have somebody who is going to get in his face and going to get the most out of him. Because one thing about Paul George, he's not going to put up with that at all. So I kind of think the dynamic could work if they stay healthy enough. I think they're dangerous. I do. In a postseason, if you put that team healthy and you're shortening rotations and you put the guys they have capable of being on the floor, it's really going to be a difficult team to defend, and they're going to be able to get buckets in a fourth quarter in big spots easier than a lot of other teams will, including easier than the Knicks will be able to if they're healthy.
Totally. And that's the East, man. Your Knicks, by the way, dude. I mean, Jalen Brunson, I think, is a first-time father. Recently, so congratulations to him. You look at that starting lineup alone, and this is at least what's listed online. I don't know if this is going to be the actual starting lineup, but over on ESPN, they're listing the Knicks starting five as Jalen Brunson, Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson.
It's a good team.
Read
the bench. Read the bench.
Fantastic. The bench. Dante DiVincenzo. Josh Hart. You folks got Precious Achiuwa back for a bargain. Congrats on that. Jericho Sims, is he worthy of mentioning?
I mean, the loss of Hartenstein is a problem because they're going to play with Randle at the 5 a lot. And the amount of space on that floor, DiVincenzo, I mean, you guys, I mean, obviously well liked by a lot of the viewers of this program for what he did out there. Josh Hart is one of the better glue guys we've got going in the whole league right now. They're going to be a dangerous team. Mikal Bridges is a really good player. So, what it opens up for Brunson, who already is dangerous, and what he's been able to do one-on-one, the Knicks are going to be a really good team. And they could lock down and play some defense in a lot of spots, which is guys like Hart and DiVincenzo and Bridges, all these guys you're mentioning, Robinson in the middle, they all can play defense. It's going to be fun. That's why it's not going to be easy for the Celtics. It's not. And look, the East has been shit for a long time, and it's had nothing entertaining to talk about for a long time. Let me tell you something. You may get sick of it out west, but the ratings won't get sick of a Boston-New York rivalry that runs the East for the season, and they got a good chance to have that happen. That's going to be fun for the sport.
So fun. Just all these discussions are just making me Jones for basketball. Is Miles McBride worth mentioning, by the way?
He's okay. He can shoot the ball and play a little bit, play a little defense. He'll be fine. But I mean, they're going to have a lot of time where you're going to have all those Villanova players out there at once with like Julius Randle in the middle. But OG, to the point, that's what people, guys like that, OG Anunoby, who still probably has some more in the offensive bag to learn as he goes along, but guys with length who could D up and defend your best player, this, watching guys like having somebody on your team that can go defend the best players on the other club when you get into a postseason, that's what matters. You're not going to shut down a Jason Tatum, right? But they've got the Knicks guys who can go ahead and try and slow those guys down. So I think it's going to be fun, and I think it'll be, Boston, New York, and Philadelphia. Those are some old rivalries that now can kind of get resparked. And obviously the NBA, is happy about being able to put the Knicks on there because they get to put New York on.
Hell yeah, dude. Exactly. The Knicks are what the league hoped the Nets were going to become.
Correct. Which they never will.
What are your thoughts real fast? What about the Bucks, man? Like, are they worthy of being in this discussion with the top Eastern Conference dogs? Or are you thinking maybe by February, Giannis Antetokounmpo is going to be requesting a trade? What do you think happens in Milwaukee?
I don't think he'll request a trade because I believe in him as a human, and I think he will feel the decision that he made was going to be the time period before that. I think once he made that decision, I think he'll stick with that. Now, forever? No, maybe not. But this soon, I doubt it. But somebody just posted about it with Damien about team chemistry. What's the chemistry of the Bucks? Can someone tell me?
Exactly.
Like, does
None.
anyone know?
None.
Like the Boston Celtics, to your point, and you're right, like they already were glued together pretty darn well. And when you add Drew Holiday seemingly to any group, which is just dumb of the Bucks to let him go right, in any way, like he just makes everything better. We just got guys who won double national championships that are all now playing again, who already had all that, and then what the Knicks had. But Philadelphia kind of gets lumped into what's the chemistry going to be there, and the Bucks are absolutely there. Look, Damian Lillard is one of my favorite players of this generation. So I'm a huge fan of him as a person. I love the way he represents himself. I hate that he was stuck in Portland forever. No offense, it's a nice area, but in terms of in market, but at his age and what he is now, the miles on him, I just don't know if they have enough. Man, they're got a playoff team, but I don't think they're winning a championship.
Damian Lillard should be in Miami. That's my take on him.
Man, it's a shame because I love
it. Is like he should have been on the Heat. And you look at the East is again. I really love seeing this, man. It should not just be the Western Conference and then some scraps in the East. Like the East now, besides the 4 teams we've talked about,
way better.
Cleveland is going to be good. Yep. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to be a contender,
no, but they're good. They are good.
They're going to be good. Orlando could surprise a lot of people this
Absolutely
year. I mean,
be a playoff team for sure.
Totally. Pelican Banchero, I mean, we don't know what his ceiling is yet. I mean, this guy could emerge as one of the top players in the game this year. We don't know. And then you have a team like the Miami Heat, right? Who they always going
to be there somewhere.
They're in there somewhere. They
best coach in the NBA.
And a team we haven't even mentioned until just now, the Indiana Pacers, who might be really good too. It's
sure.
The East is
good.
Who
will be really good.
Yeah, who will be good.
And,
yes.
I mean, Halliburton and what they've built. I mean, they should be probably just getting started. So, look, to your point, it was a long time that way where it was like, nobody cares. It's like when you mentioned the NFL when like Troy Aikman and Brett Favre and Steve Young and all those guys did the NFC, and it was like, who the hell cares? Like Stan Humphries of the Chargers and some nonsense, right? I mean, no, and that was a thing that actually happened in our life, right? Like that was the AFC for a long period of time. Like it was just a sacrificial lamb in the Super Bowl. Like it just didn't matter, right?
It was like 83 to 97. I think it was NFC nonstop.
So it's to your point. I mean, and the East was this way for a long time. I mean, so it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think the NBA right now is full with a lot of parity. There are a lot of teams that can be really good. There's a lot that we have to learn, and there are a lot of teams led by younger players. So it's a lot of old versus young because Minnesota is no joke. Exactly. I mean, they're just the Oklahoma City and what they've done. Like some of these teams, are no joke, and they're going to really contend in the West and give a lot of those top teams with some older players a run for their money down the stretch of this season.
It always feels good to me when you see decisions that actually make sense, that are logical, because they're just, for every sound decision you see in this world, you get like 5 that just make absolutely no sense. And the reason why I bring that up is because thank you NBA for just 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, introducing the play-in concept, right?
Yeah.
Like that was revolutionary. Like until that happened, you had so many teams tanking by the 2/3 mark. You don't see that anymore. And the NBA is so damn deep now that you're not seeing teams getting screwed out of positions that they otherwise are now taking advantage of. So bravo, Adam Silver for the play-in tournament.
Yes.
And for doing
things that other leagues would be too afraid to do, because if they fail and they don't work, it looks like a flop. But the NBA is never afraid to do that, and that league has always stood apart because of that. Major League Baseball is way in the back, like 7 miles, but NBA has always stood apart for that reason.
Do you agree with Damian LaRoche in the chat, who, by the way, is a Golden Dazer? That's a membership club now that's introduced with Golden Days, my side of things here on NBA Coast to Coast. So if you ever want your chats routinely featured on my program, and Casey, at some point, hopefully you'll get your own thing going with club memberships and all that good stuff. But I think it's like $2.99 a month. You will have your chats featured routinely. Damian LaRoche in the chat, a Golden Dazer, writes, quote, "They took a page from the MLB.
With the wild card.
An MLB expert and then some. Is that a fair assessment?"
Ish. I mean, they used to have the 1-game wild card. Now they have a 3-game series, but that was something that was instituted to get other teams in the mix and get smaller cities in the mix and to make it feel like a game 7 before you play game 1. And it's especially, look, the NBA postseason is the longest, most drawn out process in the history of mankind, in large part because of television. Like
Right.
like, you know, you shouldn't take 2 weeks to play 7 games, but it seems like that happens all the time.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, it really is. It's miserable to cover, but it's like, you know, fun if your team is in it, but you could fall. So, yeah, I think some of the things that they've added and the changes that they've made have really helped, but they've got top tier talent now in a number of different cities. It used to be, you know, just 2 or 3 teams that would have all the great players, and then we'll see if there's an upstart. But we mentioned Anthony Edwards in Minnesota. And we haven't even talked about Luka Doncic, right? And Kyrie and now Clay, who are in Dallas, right? And you think about, you know, Shea Alexander, right? And all these different stars that are now, you mentioned Paolo Banchero, right? All these guys who are in smaller cities, right? And not playing for, you know, the Lakers and the Celtics like the league used to be like forever, or then Golden State or whatever. So it's fun, man. And I think it's gonna lead for a little bit of a crazy season. And it's what makes the offseason great and what makes the trade deadline now great, because so many different teams have a chance to make that one tweak or that one move that can then propel you. We used to say, now I'll ask you this, and I know I'm getting outside of the gambling thing, but you know,
who cares?
This is what happens. We used to
What happens
go
with 2 people who are just riffing and having fun. This is what happens.
we used to go into an NBA season often and say, and I know we used to do it at Turner, like I probably did it on the air, but we did it off the air all the time. How many teams do you think can actually win the championship? And usually there were like 5 that you legitimately could even, and 2 of the 5 were probably, okay, if this happens and then that happens. Now you look at it, there are a bunch.
Yeah, you're right.
Because in the West, I don't even know who's going to win the West. Do you? I mean, I could give you probably 5, 6 teams that can. So if I don't even know who's going to win a conference or a division or what the seeding is going to look like, now all of a sudden it opens up. I don't know who's coming out of the East. Am I guaranteed that it's Boston? I'm not.
No.
Right.
No.
So all you need one injury to one of those 2 players, and then all of a sudden it's not. Right. So I just think we've opened it up to being, even if you have a super team, like if we entered, you know, some super team of, look, the Warriors aside, because nobody I've seen would have beaten that team. Nobody. Okay. As even with Jordan's Bulls, they wouldn't have beaten that team. I don't think.
I actually disagree with you there, but we could save that for another day. That's
save that for another day. So I don't think so. But most super teams now, even if you walked in and could create one, they're not waltzing anywhere because there's just so many teams that have a lot of talent. So NBA is in a really great spot. Really good spot.
It is, man. And you saying that in the old days, whether it was 10, 20 years ago, whenever, you know, that you could name 5 teams that were legitimate contenders. I think that's generous. I think in years past, you'd maybe have like 2, 3. It was like a foregone conclusion. And this was the era of dynasties, and we're seeing that come to an end right now. But I like that you brought that up. Like, who are the actual contenders? I'll list the teams, and you tell me if you agree or disagree with everybody I'm going to mention. In terms of legitimate title contenders this year, in the West, I see OKC.
Yeah.
Dude, Denver's a tough one. I'll still list Denver, even though
you have to, because
you have to. Yeah. So OKC, Denver, Minnesota, Dallas. I weirdly now will say Phoenix, just because Devin Booker is another player who I think benefited tremendously from that Olympics.
They have the talent. They
have the talent, and him and Durant getting the chemistry with the Olympic thing.
They have a talent.
They got Tyus Jones for practically nothing. So anyway, those are my contenders in the West. And then in the East, Boston, New York, Philly.
Yeah, that's probably right. I like Indiana, I like Milwaukee. Those teams could they get to an Eastern Conference final, or yes, but I don't think they're championship. But yeah, there's 8 teams you just mentioned.
It's crazy,
and
it could be 10, right? Because you just said the Bucks, maybe
you didn't mention the Bucks. We didn't mention. Look, the Lakers aren't winning a championship, but my point being, we didn't mention a team that has LeBron on it. So, you know, you've got excitement from teams, right? We didn't mention Steph, and we didn't mention the Warriors. Exactly. So think about how many different teams there are that are appointment viewing now in the league. If those 2 guys, your 2 most exciting players to watch in the sport and most well-known, are not even on the 8 teams that we just brought up. I mean, it really is going to be a banner season for the NBA.
It's incredible. Sure. And I know we're up against the clock here. We were supposed to talk gambling, and we ended up not even listing anything. So I'll cover this part of it in terms of gambling.
Yeah.
And I touched on this like 30 minutes ago. Now we're coming back to it. Again, this is just it's hoops.
That's all right.
Hoops all day.
That's all right.
Opening night, Thursday, October 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
The New York Knicks are going to be taking on the Celtics at the Garden. The line is already out, and the Celtics are
Should I
favored.
guess?
Go.
5?
Ding, ding, ding on the dot.
Oh,
You
is
nailed
it? And totally guessing, but
exactly what. That's a good guess. It's a perfect guess. It's literally -5, and then the over/under is 221. Your thoughts on that, man? If you're a betting man right now, which you literally could bet on this with Bet Online and just log in, put some money in, use the promo code BLEAV BLEAV, and you'll get some money matched to that. Celtics -5. What are you betting?
Everyone's healthy.
Yes, except for Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah. Ooh, it's tough. So my initial thinking would be I would take the Knicks getting the points because they're at home and it's to open a season and all of the.
No, it's in Boston.
Oh, it's in Boston.
Yeah.
Oh, you said at the Garden, and I thought you meant Madison Square Garden.
There's 2 gardens. You're right. I screwed that up.
2 gardens. Okay, let me just correct you there. There's 1 garden, and there's also another building in Boston.
Would the Boston fans agree with that though? Like if you said
I don't
that
really
to them?
give a shit, to be honest with you, because
Sounds good.
okay,
Sounds good.
because if we're being fair, Boston Garden is known for the Celtics. Madison Square Garden is where the biggest fights in the history of planet Earth have ever happened, among 900,000 other things.
I will defer to you on this 100%.
If we're being fair, like in terms of overall, or sorry. But that
so
being
this
said,
is on the is it called the parquet? Is that what they call the
yes,
floor?
and I thought Boston was favored by 5 in New York, which I'd be fine with because they were still the champions. In Boston, yeah, I would probably take the Celtics, and 2 reasons. 1, because that's a really tough place for anybody to go into in that spot coming off a championship with all the things you mentioned, and they know New York is going to be their.
Absolutely. Yep. Oh, we just lost your audio, man. We went an hour without any issues there, so that was impressive. I'm gonna while you fix that real fast. No, I still can't hear you, man. I'm sorry. But while you're dealing with that, and we're wrapping the show up anyway, so if it was gonna happen, now's a good time. Oh, are you back? Okay, he's fixing his issue. I'm gonna take the Knicks with the +5, and the reason why, first of all, there's no money line set up yet. I would have contemplated taking the money line for this
for some reason.
Oh, you're back. I hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? I can't. I don't know why.
I can hear you now. Just leave and come back.
I'm going to back out and come back in. I cannot end the show. I will not end the show this way. They can hear me saying that. I will not do that to you. All right, hold on. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay, he'll be right back. Casey Stern will be right back. And as we wrap it up, I'm gonna take the Knicks on that, just because ring night has an unpredictability to it, and a lot of times teams disappoint when it comes to ring night, and either they're elated and they were having too much fun, and there ends up being a letdown. So I'm gonna say the Knicks. I'm gonna take them. I would take the money line if that was available. It is not currently available, but +5 sounds good to me. And then the other game on opening night is the T-Wolves at the Lakers. And the Minnesota Timberwolves, despite playing on the road, they're in LA, are favored by -1.5. And I'm going to take that line. I think the Timberwolves are a considerably better team than the Lakers. And if they're going to be just 1.5 point favorites against LA, sign me up. I'll take that. Otherwise, yeah, I guess Casey is gone. So that's it for the program. Although he did say he doesn't want to end on that note, so I'll give him one more second. In the meantime, one more time, this program, I just want to announce NBA Coast to Coast. Oh, he's back. He is back, sir. There
okay, sorry about that.
I just want to wrap up. So I picked to wrap things up. I picked the Knicks just because usually on ring night. You get an unpredictability to that, and oftentimes the champions have a letdown because they're celebrating, they're having fun. I'm going to go Knicks +5. I like the 5. Give me those points. If there was a money line, I would have gone with that as well. But I'll take the +5. I can't remember if you already made your pick. I don't think
I was going to take Boston because I wanted full circle, like when you do a bit when you're doing comedy, and they totally screwed it up. Like they thread what their opening bit is to the end usually, right?
Right.
So because I tried to explain to everyone that I'm aware that if I bet the opposite will happen, as a Knick fan, I'm going to put out there that I take the Celtics, giving the 5 points, because then I can't be wrong. Either I'm a genius or more likely, because I put that out in the ether and will lose some of you money, now the Knicks will win. But I'll take the Knicks.
I like your logic. Yeah, it's sound. Good job. And
Well,
the other game, the nightcap of opening night, I don't know if that's going to be on TNT. I don't know who's broadcasting it. It usually is TNT. You know what? I haven't even talked to you about that yet, dude. We'll save that for next week. There's plenty more to talk about. The Timberwolves and the Lakers. The Lakers are underdogs in this one. Minnesota is favored on the road by 1.5. The OU is 224.5.
Yeah, Minnesota. Yeah, Minnesota.
That's what I did too.
Yeah, even in the first game of the season where the Lakers' age really shouldn't hurt them, I'm still taking Minnesota. Yeah, look, the Lakers are going to be interesting to see how the whole thing with JJ works, and is Anthony Davis performing well, and is he happy? You know, they've got Reeves, they've got other players. The Lakers are not a bad team. I do think people kind of crap on them and act like they're not. They're not going to be an easy team to walk through at all, but they're not nearly as dynamic as Minnesota. And I think when you talk about guys who have something to prove, Anthony Edwards takes the floor every game that way. And in that kind of a spotlight, he's going to be treating that like a championship opportunity to kind of show up the Lakers and LeBron, that it's his league now. I think Minnesota by 10.
I like it. And the Lakers oftentimes have letdowns to start the season. So I'm with you. I like that line as well. Minnesota minus 1.5. To finish up the show, the odds to win the championship. We'll just list off a few teams here. Mm-hmm. The Celtics are the favorite, plus 300, which means if you bet 100, you'll win 300 on that. The New York Knicks have the fifth best odds at plus 850. Mm-hmm. I don't agree with the fact that the Sixers have better odds than the Knicks. The Sixers are plus 800. The Knicks are plus 850. And then the Thunder and the Nuggets are also ahead of the Knicks. I don't like that, man. I think Knicks at plus 850 is actually a steal if you're interested in betting on futures. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Where's Dallas?
Dallas is right after the Knicks. They have the sixth highest odds at plus 950.
Yeah, I think the Knicks and Dallas are two really nice bets in the mix that you just gave me, because I am a believer in Dallas this year. I am not a huge Kyrie guy with some of the antics and some of the stuff before, but he is really bought in with what's going on there. And as long as that stays a little kumbaya, and with what Clay can add, he does not need to add old Clay to this team. He just doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Doncic guy. I think he will win a championship during his career. I think that's going to happen. And right now, with a landscape that's kind of all over the place a little bit, because so many teams have parity, you look how close they were last year. Putting a few dollars on Dallas at that spot is not a bad decision, in my opinion.
And they're plus 950 on that. Other odds for winning the title, the Timberwolves are plus 1,200. I really like those odds. Phoenix plus 3,300. That means that's crazy.
Wow.
That's a good one to me.
Wow.
And then the Warriors are plus 4,000 currently. They're right in the middle of the pack. The Miami Heat, the Sacramento Kings, the New Orleans Pelicans all have those same odds, plus 4,000. Is there any team that sticks out to you that you want to look up, or
what's Milwaukee?
Milwaukee to me is too high. Milwaukee has currently the 8th best odds to win the title at plus 1,400.
Yeah.
I'm not touching that.
That's Giannis. Are they ahead of Indiana in those odds?
Oh yeah. They're sorry, it's not good. It's not very display friendly. Otherwise, it would have shared the screen. So Indiana, their odds to win the whole thing, dude, this is disrespectful. Plus 5,000.
Wow, that shouldn't. After the year they had last year, now look, I don't think they're winning the championship either. But you can't have them that far behind the Bucks when they went further than them. And look, it was injury riddled for sure. I don't think they would have beaten the Knicks, but they did. And you also could say, well, Halliburton was hurt, so we don't even know what happens against Boston. Even though they would have lost, it might have been closer, more competitive. That's not. That does not
crazy.
Seem the whole water, to use the
it's crazy. So there's some good odds there for you, man. I think if you put some money down, you could win. I mean, and the beautiful thing about these futures is you could bet like 5 different teams and still cover your bases and win a lot, So like, let's say hypothetically, if you put 100 down on 5 different teams, I think you're looking at really good odds, like to still profit from that. So Again, Celtics plus 300, OKC's plus 650, Phillies plus 800, Denver plus 850. I wouldn't touch that. Knicks plus 850 as well. So the Knicks are actually tied for fourth. And then the Mavericks plus 950, and then Minnesota plus 1200, Milwaukee plus 1400, the Lakers way too high plus 2500, Memphis, who was just an afterthought last year, but with John Morant back, they're plus 3300, same as the Phoenix Suns. And those are all the main ones. So any final thoughts? What do you got coming up on your program now that you're making your comeback after taking a few?
We're down into the home stretch of the baseball season ish now, which is longer than I said. The NBA postseason is long. Forget it. The Major League Baseball offseason,
that's ridiculous.
A regular season is just forever with 162 games. But I've got some episodes coming up Unfiltered coming up on Wednesday of next week, and I've got Believe in Mets coming up Tuesday of next week. I'll have all the information on my Twitter handle, which you can get at Casey Stern. You can go to Unfiltered with Casey Stern on YouTube or on Instagram as well. And you can also find this show on YouTube in the same spot. And I think just kind of wrapping this program, the NBA is in a really good spot. We've got some waiting still to do, but there's a lot still to discuss. And I'm curious, as kind of a throw out for next week, how many players that are currently playing in the NBA and what are their names do you think will have the chance to end up in a top 10 list by the time that their career is done all time?
Let's save that for next week. I like that.
Out to be in that list, because there
that.
are a couple of current players for sure who are way cart before the horse, but who have the abilities and the time to put together the kind of runs that could get into a list like that. So
great topic, dude. Because you're right. There are a few players that now,
there are
in 15 years, 10
there are
years,
some all-time talents that are playing.
There are. That's a great topic, dude. We'll talk about that and so much more. And over on Golden Days, on the gambling topic will continue, especially during this time of year. It's actually going to be the main theme to wrap up the week. Tomorrow, I have Hakeem Prophet, who is a NBA handicapper. The man makes a living betting on the NBA. So he's going to come on tomorrow. And then Friday, I don't know if this name rings a bell to you, Casey. Scotty Farrell, a radio.
Yeah, of course, Farrell on the bench, 1-800-something-29-29 or whatever. When I lived in LA, I used to listen to Farrell.
He's going to join my program on Friday. I love
Pop
Scotty.
up on a cold one, and then he would have like the on the board, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You say I love it. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, of course I know.
Love you, man. Welcome. It's so
Thank you,
good to have you back and to be hosting with you again, Casey.
Thank you.
Love you, man.
I appreciate it. Thank you, people, for joining in, and we'll chat with you soon.
Bye-bye.